Welcome to Matters Financial and Geopolitical from a Frontier. Thank you for stopping by. Let me start with a really great presentation that Ben Robson made on Friday night at the Radisson. He gave us an outlook on global markets and tried to thread together what defined a great trader. He's the author of Currency Kings, and really was a very good presentation. We've uploaded it on YouTube. Do take a look. This morning I attended an investor relations roundtable organized by Africa Practice. And one of the comments I made was that investor relations is having a certain narrative control of your story. Macro thoughts, Euro CDS. This is from the terminal. You can see the big blowout in Italy. Venezuela, I wrote over the weekend when I was looking at the oil markets, and I said Venezuela, which was another big supplier, is imploding. And take a listen of Nicolas Maduro, Meet the Petro, Venezuela's own cryptocurrency backed by the country's mineral and oil reserves, launched by none other than President Maduro. Home thoughts, my mind went back to the elephants at the Mary National Park, and on the second day we left in the morning to go and see the rhinos, and on our way we saw this group of elephants, this herd of elephants, who were moving in a phalanx type formation, and at one point at tremendous speed. And this is the photo I took. It's not terribly clear. Yesterday I had a meeting, and the destination was described to me thus: it is the only house left near the Nairobi hospital. And when I got there, it was like entering a portal into my childhood. It was a bungalow, and suddenly my grandfather, my grandmother, Shirazi, my grandfather's manservant, and everyone else was in my head, and I had to take a walk around the garden by myself to catch my breath and my thoughts. Then I came across this from the Tate, Ibrahim El-Salahi Reborn, Sounds of Childhood Dreams, which seems particularly pertinent after what I just said. Ghostly figures with stretched hands and hollow eyes emerge from a yellow ground. The figures merge into and out of one another. Limbs blend into arabesques, and heads are topped with crescents, while white overpainting blurs the distinction between abstract form, pattern, and figure. The square format, the sober palette, deliberate drips, and intentional wrinkling of the paint surface are all characteristic of El-Salahi's work from this period. While the heads of the figures recall African masks, the artist has also suggested that the elongated, black-eyed, glittering facial shapes might represent the veils our mothers and grandmothers used to wear in public, or the faces of the drummers, and tambourine players I had seen circling wildly during funeral ceremonies and chants in praise of Allah. The mythical black leopard, commonly referred to as a black panther, in a rare sighting by Bobby Neptune in northern Kenya. And from there it took me to Giuseppe Tomasi de Lampedusa, The Leopard, Il Gattopardo, one of the great books of all time. Good manners apart, though, the appearance of those monumental dishes of macaroni was worthy of the quivers of admiration they evoked. The burnished gold of the crusts, the fragrance of sugar and cinnamon they exuded were but preludes to the delights released from the interior. When the knife broke the crust, first came a mist laden with aromas, then chicken livers, hard-boiled eggs, sliced ham, chicken and truffles, and masses of piping hot, glistening macaroni, to which the meat juice gave an exquisite hue of suede. Of course, the very famous saying from that book is, if we want things to stay as they are, things will have to change. Now the road was crossing orange groves in flower, and the nuptial scent of the blossoms absorbed the rest as a full moon does a landscape. The smell of sweating horses, the smell of leather from the carriage upholstery, the smell of prince and the smell of Jesuit were all cancelled out by that Islamic perfume evoking houris and fleshly joys beyond the grave. And on that note, this is a photograph of a real leopard that I took in the Samburu tree. Political reflections. Malaysia's Prime Minister Mahathir bin Mohamad warned of China's neo-colonialism in an interview with BBC Hard Talks' Zainab Badawi. This is the short link, and the full interview is there as well. A lot of controversy around some of his comments that he made in the full interview. US-China thrusting towards a new Cold War, writes Asia Times, as the US squeezes China economically through an escalating trade war. It is simultaneously ramping up military efforts to challenge Beijing's recent strategic gains in the contested South China Sea. China apparently views its roiled relations with the US as an existential struggle, with the ongoing trade war seen as part of a broader containment strategy. Washington is now intensifying through military means of the South China Sea. On Sunday, a Chinese military vessel sailed close to a US destroyer ship conducting freedom of navigation operations in the vicinity of the disputed Gavin and Johnson reefs in the sea's sprattly chain of islands. The US Navy accused China of engaging in an unsafe and unprofessional maneuver. They came as close as 40 meters to the USS Decatur's bow. In response, China accused the US of violating its sovereignty and security, and that the US's repeated deployment of military ships near its claimed islands without permission was seriously damaging. See no US military ties. In the skies, the US has countered China's expansive claims through the recent deployment of B-52 bombers as part of a continuous bomber presence in the South China Sea, a policy China has characterized as provocative. I'll take you back to December 2013, at a time when Obama was in power, and he spoke of a pivot to Asia. And I said then, and I think it applies now, I see the pivot to Asia as the encirclement of China, then the shrinking of its operating theater, and then lighting the tinderbox that is the periphery. And I said then that Xinjiang might well morph into China's Afghanistan, and you can see what China's trying to do about that. This is a US Navy photo showing the confrontation between the USS Decatur and the PRC warship 170 in the South China Sea on Sunday. 2 photographs there. Take you back to the tariff wars. Who blinks first? I was talking about James Dean, an iconic American actor who tapped into the universal yearning and angst of nearly every adolescent human being with a raw connection that has surely not been surpassed since. In one of his most consequential films, Rebel Without a Cause, 2 players decide to settle a dispute by way of a near-death experience. Each speeds an automobile towards a cliff. A simple rule governs the challenge. The first to jump out of his automobile is the chicken, and by universally accepted social convention concedes the object in dispute. The second to jump is victorious, and indeed, I think Trump has challenged Xi Jinping to a chicky run. Trade is not a weapon. Trade is not for war. It is a tool for keeping world peace, says Alibaba Group Executive Chairman and UNCTAD Special Advisor Jack Ma. So we've got the US ratcheting up the pressure here. Great to see so many people here in Broome bursting in confidence and conservatism and democratic freedom. Chuck checkers, as Boris Johnson Zero hedge. History may one day rule. This was the fateful geopolitical moment when the European Union clinched its PhD on foreign policy. This is Zero Hedge, referencing the article from yesterday by Pepe Escobar. And I was saying, good luck with that, Federica Mogherini. At least she showed willing, which is as far as it will go. I was talking about the grand bargain between the US and the Saudi king, established that oil would always be denominated in dollars, and folks from Saddam Hussein to Chavez of Venezuela, and now the High Representative of the European Union for Foreign Affairs, Federica Maria Mogherini, have all sought to break the chokehold of the petrodollar. Mogherini announced that Europe would create a special purpose vehicle, a legal entity to facilitate legitimate financial transactions with Iran, and concluded by saying, good luck with that, Federica. At least you showed willing. Sky News has pronounced Jeremy Corbyn king of all he surveys. In its assessment of his keynote speech, Lord Jim O'Neill got an ironic mention in the speech, as written in the FT, that Labour is poised to shake up the status quo. Daily Mail's Quentin Letts delivered a backhanded compliment. Don't scoff at Comrade Corbyn. His party's got zip in its tank. And if the Tories don't wake up, we're all banjaxed. Even The Guardian, arguably Corbynism's most dedicated adversary, endorsed the leader's speech as catching the zeitgeist. Holly Toynbee, having spent the best part of the last 3 years trying to sink Corbyn, now says he's winning the battle of ideas. His proficiency is the legacy of more than 30 years as an activist and campaigner, not of a 3-year crash course in the ways of the political establishment. Guardian claims that Labour fought last year's election on policies from the past, while its new agenda is future-facing and concerned with dispersing the rights, wealth and power currently concentrated in a few hands. Media focus has been on domestic economic policy, but it is arguably in foreign affairs that Corbyn's challenge to political orthodoxy is most striking. He promised to put diplomacy before tub-thumping threats. No more reckless wars of intervention like Iraq or Libya. He condemned the Tory collusion with the Saudi-led war on Yemen, which has displaced millions of people and killed tens of thousands of children, and said Labour would work to resolve the world's injustices, not standing idly by, or worse, fueling them in the first place. One common interest lies in a total break with the patterns of the past. By refusing to change, Corbyn has already changed a lot. As I said, his tilt towards a silver vote, which was, I listened to his conference speech, and he definitely tilted that way, was subtle and sophisticated. He has already sewn up the youth vote. He is the coming man, I said last week. 31st of July, I wrote about how the youth vote slept in during Brexit, then woke up for the UK snap election and nearly carried Jeremy Corbyn to 10 Downing Street. The problem here is this, and it's best seen in this cartoon by Hoyard, Boris and Theresa, and I think that's the opportunity for Jeremy. Of course, Boris was very happy to see so many people bursting in confidence in conservatism and democratic freedom. Let's move on now to the currency markets. Euro dollar 115.72, dollar index 95.29, Japanese yen 113.86, Swiss franc 0.9850, the pound just below 130, the Aussie 0.7166, Indian rupee just off a record low 72.975, South Korean won 11.17, 92 Brazilian real 394.18. That's broken down. That's rallied through 4. Egyptian pound 17.9260, South African rand 14.299. That remains pretty strong. Dollar index, this is a 3-month chart, I remain bullish about it. Euro climbed on reports that Italy's government has trimmed its budget deficit plans. 115.73. Commodity markets, Peter Brandt, who I respect tremendously as a chartist, is calling the bottom in gold. Close above 12.15 important, he says. We're last at 12.03. He's also calling for a bottom in silver. This is his silver chart as well. Silver tends to be gold on steroids. Trump claims he told King Salman of Saudi Arabia, "King, we're protecting you. You might not be there 2 weeks without us. You have to pay for the military. And that took me back to what I wrote about over the weekend and the grand bargain between a US president and a Saudi king in February 1945, when Roosevelt met King Abdulaziz of Saudi Arabia in person aboard the USS Quincy. But the history of the that was not when the history of oil started, but that's when the history of the petrodollar started. Essentially, that bargain is what Trump is referring to. Oil steady near the highest level in almost 4 years. Last trading on WTI at $75.36. It looks very strong indeed. Brent crude I wrote about over the weekend being at a 4-year high, and this is the daily chart of the December Brent contract. Next target $85.62 according to Peter Brent. Again, Indonesia has been rocked by a volcanic eruption days after an earthquake and tsunami killed more than 1,200 people on the same island. India rupee, this is a chart from Sun Chartist. Asia dollar index year to date, constituent performance. The rupee is the worst, minus 12.89%. Over the weekend, I touched on this and I said this is a double whammy for many emerging markets, strong oil, weak currencies, with India and its Prime Minister Modi a sitting duck, for example. Oil in India don't mix well, David Inglis. The Philippine stock market is the worst among the world's worst this year, and so is Dubai from this graph. Let's move on to Africa. FLOTUS is leaving real Donald Trump, says Trevor Noah, of course, to visit Africa. She received a welcome ceremony in Accra yesterday. The Kempinski was full of FBI-type characters checking on its security ahead of her imminent visit. Emerson Mnangagwa and his government are cornered. No free money is coming. 5 cents on every dollar transferred will drive people away from the banking system. US dollar shopping for foreigners, including truckers, unenforceable nonsense. Vendors won't disappear with no jobs. Zimbabwe is in a lot of debt. Since the GNU ended, they managed to expand domestic debt from 275.8 million in 2012 to current levels of $9.5 billion against $7.4 billion of external debt. Total public debt, $16.9 billion. How and why? I'm going over yesterday's fiscal monetary statements in Zimbabwe, and this still leaps out. I can't think of another frontier sovereign, pariah or not, that increased debt levels at a similar rate. It's an impressive achievement in a deranged way. Plenty of problems to solve there. Madagascar elections, 36 candidates, 4 ex-presidents and a lot of money. This is Africa arguments. Very interesting, saying that amount spent per voter is the highest in the world. It will be a battle of means, says Schneider. The big 3 candidates, and I can't possibly pronounce them, have very substantial means. Ethiopia has one of the smallest manufacturing sectors in the world, 6% of GDP. Kenya is 8% of GDP. It's fascinating how misled the world is on this. This is Charlie Robertson, who spoke about that in an interview that we had. Durban poison dope inspires South Africa's first cannabis beer. South African craft brewery has launched the nation's first lager containing cannabis, capitalizing on the globally known Durban poison strain after the private use of the plant was legalized in the country last month. Drinks infused with marijuana-derived compounds will grow to a $600 million market in the US within the next 4 years. Something to think about. South African all shares down 6.78% this year. Dollar versus rand. The rand remains firm. I think it's a spillover from people from Ramaphosa's doing some investor relations at UNGA. Egyptian pound 17.9260. Nigeria is going to be the envy of the world soon, says the Vice President Osinbajo on Independence Day. Nigerian all shares down 14.46% so far this year. Ghana Stock Exchange is up 13.85%. this year. Insomnia no more for Zambian finance chief over an elusive IMF deal. Zambian Finance Prime Minister Margaret Wanakatwe is no longer having sleepless nights over an IMF loan the Southern African nation had been trying unsuccessfully to secure for the past 2 years. I've talked about 4 things that keep me awake. 4 months ago I was saying IMF, I don't say that anymore, she told business leaders in Lusaka. Because the IMF, I believe, will come on board at some point tomorrow or the day after. Her other concerns are debt sustainability, extending the nation's revenue base, domestic arrears, and clearing bad perceptions, she said. Zambia is at high risk of debt distress, according to the IMF, and last month saw yields on its dollar bonds soar as high as 17%. The kwacha has depreciated by more than 20% against the dollar this year. Things like that are important, and that's why I believe the IMF is important. More importantly, is that we sort out our economy. And we're doing it. You guys are doing it. I'll just need to do more. And believe in yourselves. Become more positive. Make that glass half full. And you'll be surprised at what happens. You'll be surprised at that bond yield. It will come down. The government will need to spend about $1.5 billion on external debt servicing next year, and because foreign exchange reserves are close to an 8-year low of $1.8 billion, it will need new borrowing to pay, Standard Bank has said. On the 17th of September, I was writing about this problem with a lot of our policy makers. I said there are no more quaaludes left, and policy makers will no longer be able to pop them. Quaaludes promote relaxation, sleepiness, and sometimes a feeling of euphoria. This report, which admittedly was from October last year, Moody's Investors Services set to downgrade 3 top banks. Very curious because it got a lot of attention. And when I checked into it, it was a year old. But if you look at the data points in this article by Business Daily, they're actually current data points, debt to GDP. And what the interesting thing, which I'd forgotten about, was they're talking about the negative doom loop. The banks holding so much government securities at a time when the government is being downgraded. Nairobi All Shares down 12.83% this year. Nairobi NSE 20 is down 23.1% this year. Bolloré Logistics has for the past 6 months fallen behind in paying for leased trucks, even as it implements staff rationalization that will see 600 workers lose their jobs. Numbers just aren't adding up. I've had to part ways with the company because I haven't been paid and I can't wait anymore. My lorries are being used, yet I'm not earning from them. Britain gets an investor's nod to retire 6 billion shillings of a bond. Chinese developer is now the top Home Africa investor. Home Africa's share market valuation has collapsed to $2.6 million. And let me leave you with that, and thank you once more.